Well, I think we're just about ready to kick off now. We've sorted out the computers, so hopefully it'll all be okay. It's wonderful to be here at the O'Malley Clan Rally, and a very big thank you to the organisers for inviting me here to talk about the DNA of the O'Malley clan. Now, I was contacted initially by Dennis. We first met about 2 years ago, and Dennis did a DNA test when I was speaking up in Dala in North Tipperary. And subsequently, he found out that I was his cousin. So we're still trying to figure out exactly how we're connected. But then Dennis said, would you mind maybe interpreting some of the results of some of the O'Malleys who have done the DNA test? And I said, sure, but there's actually an O'Malley clan project, O'Malley DNA project on Family Tree DNA. Why don't I contact the administrator and see if you could join the O'Malleys to the O'Malley clan project? And I contacted the administrator and there was no reply. His name was Bob Maley from America. Does anybody know Bob Maley at all or come across him? So I don't know what's happened to him, but I wrote to Family Tree DNA and said, well, why don't you take it over? So I have now taken over as administrator of the O'Malley project on Family Tree DNA. And we've added all the recent O'Malleys to the database, and I'm going to show you some of the results from that particular study. Now, this is all available, or it's being recorded for YouTube, so that any of you that want to explore some of the references and the links that I have in the slides, you'll see this on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, which is simply just DNA and family tree research. So that's all you need to know. Just Google DNA and family tree research YouTube, and you'll find the slides there. In fact, if you just Google DNA of the O'Malley clan, you'll probably find the video there as well. But do feel free to take any photographs you want, or if you want to take a photograph of a particular slide, then please feel free to do so. So that's the start. We have the O'Malley Clan Association crest there, and then Terra Marique Potens, not potans, but potens, powerful on land and sea. Potans means drunk. So be very careful how you spell that. So the topics I'm going to cover today are the O'Malleys in historical texts, DNA testing for beginners, the O'Malley DNA project, DNA results, and do they match the historical texts? Do they tell us something different? And where do we go next? So this is going to be a quick overview of where we are now and where we have yet to go with the O'Malley DNA project. And throughout, we'll be seeing that DNA is connected to geography, and very intimately connected to geography. It's also intimately connected with surnames. And it has also helped us build the tree of mankind. When man first came out of Africa, or first started in Africa, ran around there for 200,000 years, and then came out of Africa 50,000 years ago to populate the rest of the planet, including our good old Emerald Isle. DNA is also associated with historical texts, and that is some research that is fairly recent, and it's ongoing, but I'll be showing you an example of how one group of the O'Malleys has actually got a very close association with a very famous Irish warlord. So that's to come, and also how DNA can actually help you in your family trees, and specifically how to research your O'Malley line, going back along your father line, O'Malley. So first of all, the O'Malleys in historical texts, where did they come from? Where did the O'Malleys come from? So there are a huge range of sources, a lot of them available online for the O'Malley surname origins. You know, you can Google O'Malley and it'll come up with a variety of websites which you have to take with a pinch of salt, because the internet has a habit of propagating mistakes again and again and again. And there's websites like Finch and Heron, like Wikipedia. Again, there's lots of errors in Wikipedia, so a big cake of salt when you're looking at it. But it gives you perhaps a pointer to more reliable sources of information, such as the surname dictionaries by Patrick Wolfe, Edward MacLysaght, O'Hart, and John Brennan more recently. And also surname distribution maps are extremely useful, and you can get those for free on forebears.co.uk or on John Grenham, €10 for a month's subscription. There's a variety of learned texts that might be out there. I'm not particularly aware if there's any O'Malley scholars that have written about the origins of the O'Malley clan, but if anybody has some ideas about that, then please let me know. And there may be some academic journals out there that actually have some articles on the O'Malleys. Again, we're still at a relatively early stage in the research, and this is something that we still need to do. And then there's the ancient annals themselves, the Annals of the Four Masters, which is available online, and that was written in the or published in the mid-1800s. There's Roger O'Farrell's Linea Antiqua. There's also the program at Cork University known as Celts, and they've digitized quite a lot of these ancient annals. And then Bartiaski, back in 2013, as part of his thesis, did a complete analysis of a lot of these ancient texts, and he has 76 tables of genealogies based on the royal Irish medieval dynasties. And that's very, very useful, and I found my own Gleesons in there as well. And then more recently, 2004, we have Leabhar Mór na Nélach, the great book of Irish genealogies. It is a 6-volume set, and there's approximately 200 pages in each volume. So you're looking at 1,200 pages of Irish genealogy. This would have been written in 1650, but it was edited by Nuala Maurice from Galway and published in 2004. You have the Gaelic on one page, you have the English translation on the other page. So it's very accessible, but it's not available online. You'll have to go to your library, and I think it's something like £600 for the set. So it's not an inexpensive tome. So those are the kind of sources. And I first went to Gleeson, and we won't read through the whole thing, but I just picked out that the O'Malleys were from County Mayo. They were predominant in the baronies of Burrishoole and Maurice. They were known for their naval exploits, and of course, Grace O'Malley is mentioned over here, Rowan Well. So not a huge amount from Gleeson, but if we went on to the Reverend Patrick Wolfe in 1923, he actually talks about two branches of the O'Malley clan. The first one in Burrishoole and Maurice over in County Mayo, but the second one in Thomond, just around the city of Limerick. So this is very interesting because from a genetic point of view, we are now expecting two genetic signatures. One genetic signature from Mayo, another genetic signature from Limerick. The other interesting thing that Wolfe comes up with is the fact that the origin of the name may be from the Old Celtic maglios, meaning chief. Now, that causes a problem. How many chiefs were there in Ireland? How many O'Malleys, how many sons of chiefs were there in Ireland? So that's immediately ringing alarm bells in my ears, and it's making me think there's probably multiple origins then of the O'Malley surname, and with multiple origins you're going to get multiple genetic signatures. There should be O'Malleys all over the place because there were chiefs all over the place and sons of chiefs all over the place. And he mentions these two separate origins, Mayo and Limerick. So I then went to John Grenham, and he's kind of summarised a variety of different surname dictionaries. And then the story gets even a little bit more confused. We have Maylies in Derry and Antrim. We have Malleys in Mayo, Maylies in Downpatrick, Malleys in Ulster, Dublin, and etc. I don't know where etc. is. We have Malleys in Armagh, O'Malley in Galway, O'Malley in Melia, O'Malley, Connacht, North Munster, and Limerick City. So again, we're getting an idea that there's many minor septs, perhaps, multiple origins of the surname, multiple genetic signatures, and also one of these up here, this one here says that it may have come from O'Mwell E, the servant of Hugh. And of course, how many Hughs were there in Ireland? And how many of them had servants? So again, another indication that we might be looking for multiple origins and multiple genetic signatures. And also this rather worrying thing, C. Malloy. And I thought, oh gosh, no please, don't tell me the Malloys and the Malleys are associated with each other. Because they are supposed to be entirely separate clans. But maybe some Malloys got accidentally spelt as Malleys, and that got sent down through the generations, or vice versa. So we have to look at the Malloys as well as the Malleys. So just looking at where we are in County Mayo, there's Burrishoole, and there's Murrisk, and there's Clewbay, there's Clare Island, where Gráinne Whale had her summer residence, and Inishboffin, where there was a castle, an O'Malley castle in Inishboffin, and recently apparently they found one of the stones in a pub, and they'd used it as the cornerstone in their wall, so that hit the papers a couple of years ago. One of the stones from the castle was actually found on a pub wall in Inishboffin. So this is where Grace O'Malley would have had her exploits back in the 1500s. And if we look at a map of 1901 and the distribution of the O'Malley surname in Ireland in 1901, there you are, bang in the middle of Clewbay in Mayo, we have a main bunch of O'Malleys. But there's also a bunch around Limerick, which is consistent with what we've read in the surname dictionaries. And you also get them in Dublin, Belfast, Derry, Galway. So the big urban centres, which is what you'd expect, because after the famine, of course, a lot of people gravitated towards the towns. So these could be urban O'Malleys who came from the country beforehand, or they could be O'Malleys that actually arose in Galway, for example, many, many generations ago, 500, 600 years ago, and those would possibly be O'Malleys that have been there for a long, long time. So it's difficult to distinguish between the two at this point in time. But let me take you back 50 years, from 1901 to 1850, just after the Great Famine. And here we are, 1850, Bates and Griffith's valuation. Again, we're seeing the majority of O'Malleys, a big clump of them in the Mayo area. But really, look at the O'Malley surname. It's really quite widespread all over Ireland. And we're looking not just at O'Malley, which is the most, we're looking at Malley without the O, which is the most frequent, followed by O'Malley with the O, and then the next most common after that would be Maley with just one L, and most common after that would be Malley, two L's but no E. So you can see that there are a huge number of variants of the O'Malley name back in 1850. And it's like Dolores said, you do have to be very careful with the surnames and the variants that it may have been. You might be an O'Malley now, but you might have been a Maley 100 years ago and a Melia 200 years before that. So it does vary an awful lot. Now let me take you back 200 years to 1659. And the surname distribution of O'Malleys in 1659's Pender census, there were only 6 of them. They were in Carbery, County Kildare, and these were titulados. Titulados is titled people. So this particular surname distribution map is only showing you the landed gentry and not the common people. And some O'Malleys would have been part of the common people. We're not all chiefs. There has to be some Indians among us as well. So this doesn't tell us a huge amount, but it does say that in 1659, which of course would have been just after Cromwell had come in and conquered Ireland, there were only 6 O'Malleys with titles in Ireland at that time. So let me take you back before Cromwell. And there's an excellent website run by Trinity College Dublin that looks at land ownership from 1641 and comparing it to land ownership in 1670. And this was a tumultuous time in Irish history. And back in 1641, this map here, you can see that the Catholics held 42% of the land, and they're in blue, and the Protestants held 42% of the land, and they're in yellow. But if we move on to 1670, which is the maps over on the right-hand side, Catholics only owned 16% of the land, and Protestants' ownership went up to about 70% of the land. So there's a huge transfer in land ownership, and the O'Malleys were affected by this as well, because 3 of the O'Malleys appear in the 1641 Down survey. And this is the first one, Lachlan O'Malley. And he's actually not here, he's actually over here on this little part of land here. If we blow that up, there's Lachlan O'Malley there on that little townland there. It's the townland of Beltra. The owner in 1641 was Lachlan O'Malley, a Catholic, but the owner in 1670 was Sir Thomas Newcomen, a Protestant. It consisted of 658
plantation acres, of which 48 plantation acres were profitable land, and they were forfeited. So they were confiscated. So Lachlan O'Malley would have had that profitable land confiscated off him, and the unprofitable land would have been left with him and his clan to live on. The same happened with Dermot MacThomas O'Malley in 1641, and he's down here in the barony of Maurice. And I love this map, because if you look over here, what is this? Patrick. And even in 1641, you could walk up those steep slopes to the cross at the top of Patrick. So this is marked on the map in 1641, and also we see that Dermot MacThomas O'Malley had this townland of Calla in 1641, but in 1670 it had passed to Sylvester Hare, who was a Protestant. So you can see that transfer of land ownership happening in Maurice as well. And then the last one is Edmund O'Malley, again in Maurice. If we blow that up, there's Croagh Patrick again. He's on the other side of Croagh Patrick in the townland of Brackloon. And in 1670, it had passed to Theobald Burke, the third Viscount of Mayo, who was Catholic actually. So, and of course the Burkes were very big in Mayo around that time as well. So those are wonderful maps, and it's all for free up on that Trinity College website. So that's 1641, 1670, but now let me take you back to the 1500s, where we have Gráinne Whale in an impossibly tight box. Well, I remember the time when I could get into it. But, she was Wonder Woman. She's Ireland's Wonder Woman, actually. Yeah, it's a very good analogy. Maybe we should get Marvel to do a DC. Oh, it's DC, that's right. Well, there actually is a movie being made about her at the moment, and it's supposed to be coming out in the near future. There's also a TV series being made about Gráinne Whale at the moment. They're both American, so but watch this space, because it might be coming to a television set near you. So Gráinne lived from 1530 to 1603, and of course she commandeered the Clew Bay area, and a lot is known about her, largely because she was in contact with Queen Elizabeth, and a lot of the information is stored in the National Archives in Kew over in England. And they have these wonderful maps there. This is Ireland on its side. That's west up there, so north is up that way. So Clew Bay and the Atlantic and America is up this way. And there's Clare Island, where she had her summer residence. Here in red is the territory of the O'Malleys. Here's another map that actually has Gráinne O'Malley written on it. So these are, I mean, the O'Malley clan is very lucky to have such ancient documents that actually document one of your ancestors. This is the petition that Grace actually sent to Queen Elizabeth. And I can just about make out at the top here, your loyal and faithful subject, Gráinne ní Malley. So isn't it incredible to actually see her name from 500 years ago written on this old piece of parchment? And this is available on a blog that they have on the National Archives. Now, a lot of you probably know the story of Gráinne Whale, but Queen Elizabeth sent her 18 questions, and here's the first 16, to try to determine who exactly she was. And on the other side over here, we have Gráinne's answers to the first 4 of those questions. So all of this documentation is available and is part of the O'Malley heritage. So where does that leave us? After doing a quick browse through some of the historical texts, and I'll come on to others later on, it means that there's 2 distinct groups of O'Malleys, so it would seem. One in Mayo, one in Limerick. There might be other ones. For example, there's a whole crowd up in Northern Ireland that might be O'Malleys as well, and there's even some in Galway as well. Does this tie in with the DNA? That's the question. So, and how likely is a multi-origin surname? Very likely, as we've seen. Servant of Hugh, Celtic for chief. Also, the Gaelic word for slow, gamal. So that could be somehow related to the O'Malleys. But Maya also apparently means gentle, sedate, stately. There's various other meanings that you can get from various Gaelic words. So Let's take a quick look at DNA testing and what it is involved and how it does help. It's very, very simple. You do a swab or you get a sample of saliva, that goes in a test tube into an envelope off to the lab. In the lab, they look at your sample, they go, oh, blue blood, must be royal, and they put it through the machine, and it comes out with the results, and they give that to you on your own web page. So you've got a username, you've got a password, you put those in, and your results come up on the internet, on your own private page. But not only that, they don't just give you your results, they compare your results to everybody else in the database. And there are over 600,000 people in the database who have done the MyDNA test, which is the one we want to do for the O'Malleys, and they give you a list of all the people that you match so that you can contact them, exchange family tree information, and see if you can break through some of the brick walls on your O'Malley clan line. The other thing that they do with family tree DNA is they actually allow you to start your own projects, and the O'Malley DNA project is one of those projects. But there are over 9,400 surname projects on family tree DNA. I also run the Gleeson one, the Farrell, the Boylan, the Maloney, the Malloy, and a few other ones as well. So you can really get addicted to it if you're not careful. I do need help, I can tell you. And let's take when you do that little DNA test and you swab your cheek, you're actually dislodging cells from the inside of your cheek. And this is what a cell looks like. That goes into your little sample. This is what a cell looks like. These little blue things here are called mitochondria, and the mitochondrial DNA, they have their own DNA called mitochondrial DNA. These mitochondria are only passed on from a mother to her children. So it's a very, very good way of going back along the mother line. Okay? That's the mother line with the mitochondrial DNA. Men get the mitochondria as well, but they don't pass it on to their children. Only girls can pass on mitochondria. So it goes back mother. Now in the nucleus of the cell, this green blob here, we have our 46 chromosomes. And you get 2 copies of chromosome 1, 2 copies of chromosome 2, and so on. You get 1 copy from your father, 1 copy from your mother. 1 copy of chromosome 2 is maternal, 1 copy of chromosome 2 is paternal. So you get 50% of your chromosomes from your father, 50% from your mother, and then they rearrange themselves into these chromosome pairs, 23 in total. The last pair there, pair number 23, are also known as the sex chromosomes because they determine what gender you're going to be, whether you're a boy or a girl. And if you get 2 X chromosomes, you're a woman. And if you get an X and a Y chromosome, need I say more? What a disappointment that was. So those are the 6 chromosomes. And the one that we're particularly interested in is the Y chromosome, because the Y chromosome only gets passed on from father to son, father to son, father to son. Only men have it. Women cannot do the Y chromosome test. Men are the only ones that can do the Y chromosome test. And it goes back father, all the way back in time, about 200,000 years, more than 200,000 years ago. This takes us back to Africa. This takes us back to the time when anatomically modern humans first emerged from Africa. What also follows the father line?
Surname.
The surname, exactly. So all the O'Malleys here, if you do your Y-DNA test, it's going to take you back along your O'Malley line. And that is why Y-DNA is so useful for researching surnames. That's the mitochondrial DNA on the other side, mother. Third type of test is the autosomal DNA test, and that looks at all of your ancestral lines. It looks at the majority of your DNA. We're not going to talk hugely about that today. It's very, very useful if you are a family tree addict and you want to do your research, then the autosomal DNA is a very, very useful test to take. But the Y-DNA in particular is good for looking at deep ancestry and also researching your surname. So now we come to the O'Malley DNA project. And this has been running since 2005 up until the present day. And we have a web page on Family Tree DNA. You can simply Google O'Malley FTDNA and you'll actually get this web page. And there's lots of information about the background, the O'Malley surname,
We also have the goals of the project there, and then we have a special place where you can post your O'Malley pedigree. And you can see that some people here have posted their pedigree, and they're going back to, this one here is a William Maley, born about 1800, not entirely sure where though. This one here, a Tig or Timothy O'Malley, born somewhere in Ireland, but we don't know where. So this is probably an American family that's over in America now, because a lot of the diaspora, when they went to America, all the information that they had was that their ancestors came from Ireland, and where they came from was lost in the mists of time. And that's why DNA is so useful for the diaspora, because by doing a DNA test, it can actually tie you in, not just to a specific county in Ireland, but a specific townland as well. So it can be really, really useful for researching your O'Malley surname. This is the recruitment into the project, and you can see that over the course of time it's gradually gone up. I took over here and we got a little bit of a boost. We have now about 57 members of the project, but that's increasing all the time, and we certainly do need more people to join. And the way to join the O'Malley DNA project is simply to do a DNA test. So for men, that would be the Y-DNA 37, which is a 37 marker test. We're looking at 37 markers on the Y chromosome, and that can only be done with family tree DNA. If you're a woman, you're more than welcome to join the project as well, all comers. You do the autosomal DNA test, and you can either do it via family tree DNA, because they do have the cheapest test if you just want to dip your toe in the water. But if you are a serious genealogist, I would recommend testing with Ancestry, because then you can download the data when you get them and transfer them for free over to family tree DNA. So it means you're fishing in 2 pools instead of 1. Also, if you're a female, you can get a male cousin, a male O'Malley relative, to do the Y-DNA test with family tree DNA and get them to join the O'Malley project thereafter. And to join the O'Malley project, you simply log in to your family tree DNA account, find the O'Malley DNA project by Googling it, and then just click on the join button in the photograph on the O'Malley page. So it's a very simple procedure. So let's focus now just on the Y-DNA. And here is a typical Y chromosome. You've got the short arm here, the long arm here. Most of the chromosomes look exactly the same. And of course, on our chromosomes, we have genes. And the genes code for a variety of different characteristics. And on the Y chromosome, it being male, it's coding for a variety of male characteristics, such as my favorite one, the inability to see or hear the obvious. There's another one down here, refusal to ask for directions. Very male characteristic. And one that's essential for survival is the ability to identify aircraft. DC-10, quick, hide, into the bowling alley. So this is what a typical chromosome looks like, and of course, dotted along the length of this chromosome there'll also be DNA markers that will be very, very useful for us when we come to tracing the O'Malley clan. So I'll put it back up. There you go. Thank you. So if we unravel that chromosome, and we unravel the whole thing, we start seeing the double helix that was discovered by Watson and Crick in 1953 in Cambridge. And then we stretch it out. It looks like a ladder or a railway track. And these are the rungs of the ladder, the sleepers of the railway track, and they are full of these letters. And this is as technical as I'm going to get. And this is all you really need to know. And these letters represent the nucleotide bases guanine, cytosine, adenine, and thymine, GCAT. G binds with C, the curvy ones bind with each other. The straight-edged ones, A and T, they bind with each other. So what you get is a mirror image of one strand on the other strand. So that's why when you see genetic code written down, it's just a series of letters. It's a string of letters, but it's only one string of letters, not 2, because the other part of the other strand is going to be the mirror image. So if you know what the numbers or the letters are on one strand, you can automatically know what the letters are on the other strand. It'll be the mirror image. So you see A and T, T and A, G and C, A and T, and so on. The important thing about this is there's 2 types of Y-DNA marker.
The first is a short tandem repeat, STR. And here you see TAC, TAC, TAC. So TAC is repeated how many times? 3 times. The value for that marker is 3. And that's how it would appear on your results page. It would say marker number 1, you have a value of 3. The person beside you might have a value of 4, or a value of 6, or a value of 2. So that's the STR markers. It's just a string of numbers. The other type of marker is the single nucleotide polymorphism, and this is just a substitution. So for example, this one here is A, it might have been G in the father, but there was a mistake made, and instead of the father copying the G, an A crept in there instead. So that mistake now is going to be passed on to their children and their children, until another mutation happens in another marker, and then 2 mutations will be passed on to the children. So it's like a paper chase. You can actually use these mutations to track back in time and figure out who came from where and build the human tree of mankind. And we'll take a look at that later on. But the key message, 2 types of DNA marker. The first is the STR. The standard test is the 37 marker test, so we're looking at 37 STR markers. That normally costs $169, but I've got a discount from Family Tree DNA, so it's $129 if you want to pick it up today. The second type of marker is the SNP marker, and they can come either in SNP packs, where you get maybe 120 markers, or you can do the big Y, which looks at about 85,000 markers. These tests tend to be on the more expensive side. The SNP packs are only $119, but the big Y is $575. It usually comes down to about $425 in the Christmas sale. The key message here is this can become expensive. Get addicted with caution. So, and I've paid for several big Y tests myself. So this is what the standard test will look like. Your 37 marker YSTR tests. And here's the marker names up here on the top. And you can see that the value of the markers is just numbers. So it's just a string of numbers. And it doesn't tell you very much in and of itself. It's only when you compare it to somebody else's string of numbers that you can start making some real deductions. The other thing that it does tell you is that they're able to look at these numbers and predict roughly what group of people in the world you belong to. So they'd be able to look at this and they'd say, okay, you belong to group RM269, that's Western European. They looked at somebody else's string of numbers and they say, oh, you're haplogroup O, that's China. And they look at somebody else and they say, oh, you're haplogroup Q, you're probably Native American Indian. So these STR markers will allow a certain amount of predictability to occur. And the important thing, the STR is a string of numbers, but the SNP markers are a series of names. So each of the markers will have a name, like RL21, DF13, DF49, and so on. So the O'Malley DNA Project results. What do the results actually tell us? And this is an example of somebody's results page. So if you did a DNA test, this is what you do, what you'd get if you went into your DNA matches. And I've taken out the first names for privacy purposes. But this is from one of the Limerick O'Malleys. And you can see here that they match somebody called O'Malley, 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 Roach, O'Malley, Hart, Slattery, Slattery. So they've got 27 matches altogether, and I've only picked out about 10 or 12 of them. And not only that, but it tells you where the earliest known ancestor of your match comes from. Michael O'Malley, Maru, Limerick. Michael O'Malley, Maru, Limerick. Dennis Maley, Capamore, Limerick. Thomas Roach, New York City, adopted. Dennis Maley, Capamore, Limerick. Miles Hart, Union County, South Carolina. Now these people are all connected genetically, and they're all relatively closely connected. The question is, what happened with Thomas Roach, who's an adoptee from New York City, and Miles Hart from South Carolina? How do they tie in with the O'Malleys? Now obviously there are some O'Malleys here that, obviously there's probably an O'Malley ancestor in the relatively recent past. But how do you explain the Roach and the Hart? The Roach is fairly easy to explain because he's actually put in here adoptee. If it wasn't for that, then you'd be wondering how come a Roach is genetically connected to the O'Malleys. But what probably happened here is that Thomas Roach is the name of the child, and the father was probably an O'Malley back in New York City around about 1933. Miles Hart, South Carolina. How is a Hart connected with the O'Malleys? Is this another case where there's an adoptee? Was there an adoption or some sort of DNA switch or surname switch somewhere along this person's lineage? So those are the kind of questions we'd need to ask ourselves. And then Slattery. Why are the Slatterys related to the O'Malleys? No? Okay, well, we'll see why they might be later on. But there are 600,000 records in the database and 270,000 Y-DNA 37 and 140,000 Y-DNA 67 marker results. So you're comparing yourself to quite a large database when you do this test. Now, why the different surnames? Slattery, Hart, Roach. Well, we've seen that Roach was an adoption. We also call it an NPE, non-paternal event, or not the parent expected. I like to call it SDS, surname or DNA switch, meaning the surname switched or the DNA switched. And there's a variety of reasons for that. It's not just adoption, it's not just illegitimacy. We'll take a little bit of a look at that. The Slatterys might be a match from before the time of surnames, which happened in Ireland around about 1,000 years ago. In the 900s, that's when surnames started emerging. Took a couple of hundred years for them to become widespread. But roughly about 1,000 years ago, for a pre-surname relative, maybe the Slatterys and the O'Malleys shared a common ancestor just before surnames were invented, and one brother took the name Slattery, one brother took the name O'Malley. That's a potential explanation as well. The other possibility is it's just a chance match. And that's caused by something called convergence, where people mutate away from each other and then over several hundred years mutate back towards each other, so they look like they're fairly closely related within the last couple of hundred years, when in fact they're actually quite distantly related by maybe 1,000 years ago. So those are the three possible explanations for why you might have different surname matches in your list of matches. As administrator of the group, what I will do then is I'll look at these results, I'll look at your string of numbers, and I'll decide, are you actually quite closely related to somebody else within the project, and then I'll group you together. And the two main things that I use for grouping are this one up here, genetic distance, and this one over here, your terminal SNP. So I'm using STR markers and SNP markers to do this analysis. Now the genetic distance is simply how closely or how distantly are you related to everybody else. A zero distance means you're an exact match. So if the genetic distance here was 0, you'd be exactly the same, no changes, no mutations, no differences in your string of numbers between the two people. But here's the genetic distance of 2. So this is 2 steps away from an exact match. And that might be because on one marker, person A has a value of 13 and person B has a value of 11. So that's a 2-step difference between the two. And you can see here that most people here, they go up to a genetic distance of 6. So this person here will be 6 steps away from an exact match to this person that they're comparing themselves to. So that's what I look at. And I also look at these SNPs here because these tell us what branch of the tree of mankind the person is on. And that can be quite helpful to distinguish, well, to see if people are likely to be on the same branch, or if they're definitely on 2 different branches, then you know that this is a false match and the Slatterys are actually not that closely related to the O'Malleys. But you have to do the work first. So these are the actual results. This is the results page of the O'Malley project. And we have 3 groups, group 1, group 2, group 3. And what we see here is that in group 1, they're both, there's O'Malley and Maley. They're both related to John O'Malley, born 1795 in Galway. And those are the SNP markers that mark the branch that they're on. The red ones are just a prediction, and they're usually quite upstream on the tree of mankind. The green ones aren't. They've actually tested that SNP, and he's come back positive for that particular DNA marker, and that's more likely to be on a downstream branch, which means closer to where we are now, closer to genealogical time, the last 1,000 years or so. And this is just taking a look at the actual markers. These 2 people have a genetic distance of 0. You can see that all of these numbers are exactly the same all the way along here. It's the blue and the pink squares that indicate mutations, a difference from the norm. So you can see that the first two people in the Galway group, they're exactly the same, genetic distance of 0. In the Limerick group, there's a couple of mutations here. Both people here have 15 for that particular marker. Both people here have 16 for that particular marker. And the people in the middle, exactly the same until you get up to here, and then there's just a one-step difference. 37 becomes 38. Otherwise, they're exactly the same. And it's interesting because in the Limerick group, the middle two look like they've got the same ancestor, and the last two look like they've got the same ancestor, which explains why their genetic signature is so similar to each other. Group 3 is a little bit different. Malloy, O'Malley, Malley, Melia, O'Malley, 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 Malloy, Melloy, O'Malley, Maley, Maley. So there's a much greater variety of surnames here. Do we see a similar, that reflected in the DNA? Let's have a look at their markers again. You can see just that there's much more coloured squares there. So there's a greater genetic distance in this last group. Well, what can we say about it? Group 1, they come from Galway. Group 2, they all seem to come from Limerick. Group 3, well, we've got Quebec, no origin, no origin. Liverpool, no origin, no origin. Mayo, Middlesex, Ireland, Ulster, Mayo, Philadelphia, no origin. So there's a couple of people in there that do have a Mayo origin but we don't know where. A lot of people haven't put the information in, and some people are in the New World, so they don't know where they come from in Ireland. So it might be the Mayo group. But, and then there's a large group of people who haven't been grouped at all. These are just ungrouped people. And what's the reason for that? Either they're a rare branch of the O'Malleys. For example, one of the people here could be those O'Malleys from Carbery, County Kildare in 1659. Or alternatively, maybe there's been a surname or DNA switch, there's been an adoption somewhere along the way, and the surname has changed, and they're an O'Malley by name, but they might be somebody else by DNA. So it's probably worthwhile spending a little of time just talking about why there can be surname or DNA switches. And everybody remembers the test card from RTE back in the 70s. We apologise for the break in transmission. Well, for DNA, it's the surname or the DNA from one or both parents has not been passed on to the child for a variety of different reasons. And remember that if surname's been around for 1,000 years, most of us are only researching from 1800 onwards. So that's the last 200 years. The 1640s saw land ownership changing and the end of the Gaelic clan system. Gaelic clan system was up to about 1600, say. So for 600 years, when surnames existed from 1000 to 1600 AD, you're looking at Brehon law. And we had 600 years of Brehon law, and strange things happened under Brehon law. Firstly, a lot of minor families might swear allegiance to the clan chief. So that would mean that as far as the O'Malleys are concerned, you know, if Grace O'Malley was predominant in Mayo, a lot of the smaller families would say, in order to show allegiance to Grace O'Malley, we're going to call ourselves O'Malley from now on. But of course, genetically, they weren't O'Malleys. They might have been O'Connors or O'Flahertys or some other clan. So that means that you're getting O'Flaherty DNA being introduced with the O'Malley surname. Another reason for why there might be this shift is because it's not just the families, but the servants of the clan, the soldiers, the vassals, the tenants, the slaves, all of them would be called O'Malley, but they may not be descended directly from the O'Malley, they might be descended from elsewhere. Adoption, fostering and guardianship were very big in Brehon, under Brehon law, so that could be another explanation for why there was a switch in surname or DNA. Very commonly, a young widow, she loses her husband, she's got 3 young children, she remarries. What does she do with her children? They take on the name of the new husband, but they have the DNA from the old husband. So that's where the new husband, if he was an O'Malley, the children would have been called O'Malley, but passed on the DNA from the first husband, who was not an O'Malley. Another reason for a DNA switch. A legal condition of marriage. You're not marrying my daughter unless you change your name to O'Malley. Very common. Or inheritance as well. Taking the wife's name upon marriage. Oliver Cromwell was not Oliver Cromwell. He was Oliver Williams. His wife was related to Thomas Cromwell, And so he took her name because she was of higher social status than he was. Customary coupling with powerful people. I still have to get my head around this, but apparently it was customary for powerful men to be entertained by your wife. And as a result of that, some of the children were not necessarily your own. And there was a convention called naming. On the wife's deathbed, she would call the husband in and say, "You know our eldest?" "Of course I know our eldest, I'm his father." "Oh, well, that's what I wanted to talk to you." So it's I still haven't got my head around that, but apparently Turlough O'Brien was a very famous example of a named child. He wasn't actually an O'Brien, he was somebody else. Infidelity, of course, very different under Brehon law. You kind of could pick and choose who you wanted, and the same for illegitimacy as well. A very different concept of what we have today under Brehon law. But all of these could be causes for why there has been a DNA switch or a surname switch back in time. And of course, if it was a very successful person like Turlough O'Brien, he probably has lots of descendants today who have the O'Brien name, but they never had O'Brien DNA because he didn't. So you might be seeing a lot of descendants today with the O'Malley name who have somebody else's DNA. And the chances of that happening are about 50%. So each of us have about a 50-50 chance that our particular DNA does not go back to the person who originated the surname we carry today. So it is fascinating. It's fascinating. But as Shakespeare said, or as Juliet said to Romeo in Romeo and Juliet, "An O'Malley by any other name would smell as sweet." Romeo and Juliet, Act 2, Scene 2. So an O'Malley is an O'Malley is an O'Malley. So that's the important take-home message. So back to the DNA results. That's why a lot of these ungrouped people may have had a DNA switch. And coming back now to the three groups of O'Malleys, other questions that arise is, where did each of these groups come from? Where did the name arise? How long have they actually carried the name? Is the DNA of the originator of the surname, or is it a surname or a DNA switch? And where do they sit on the tree of mankind? Does that fit in with what we know about the ancient annals and the historical texts? And at a later stage in the project, I hope to actually reveal the branching structure of each group within the project and just see how that particular group has evolved over time. But we need a lot more people and a lot more people to do SNP testing to actually get there. But there are several things that we can say. Group 1, they come from Galway because you can see it written up there. But how did they get there? Where were they before they got to Galway? How long have they been there? Well, you can see up there that their ancestor lived 1795. But where were they before 1795? Had they migrated in from Mayo? Had they come up from Limerick? What's the answer to that question? We can look at the DNA, and we can look at the genetic distance, and we can do a rough calculation of how old that particular, or how long they've carried that name for. And using the DNA, we get an approximation of 1830, which is close enough to 1795. Now, I say close enough because these estimates are, when you think about human beings being around for 250,000 years, for genealogy, we're only looking at the last 1,000 years. So in the entire range of 250,000 years, 1830 plus or minus 50 years is actually a very good estimate. What we can say is there's been no surname switch for the last 200 years or so, but before that, we can't really say very much. So that's the Galway O'Malleys. The Limerick O'Malleys, where did they come from? Limerick, because it's written there, the earliest known ancestors. But how did they get there, and where were they beforehand? How long have they carried the name? Well, this group of people, their oldest ancestor is this one up here, 1780. So we can be reasonably confident that they've carried that name since 1780, but where did they carry it, how long did they carry it before then? And using the DNA, and using the midpoint estimate of 50%, it looks like we can say around about 1710 at least. So these people here will have a common ancestor going back to about 1710. Well, what we need is more O'Malleys from Limerick to join this group, More O'Malleys worldwide from the diaspora, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, America. And what we want to do is we want to get the most outlying branches of this O'Malley group to give us a better estimate of how long ago this name arose in this group and for how long they've been carrying it. And this just reminds you of the mutations that you see in this group of people. And there's not a huge amount of mutations there. So then we come on to group number 3. And the interesting thing here is that the grouping is probably not 100% accurate. The reason for that is the SNP M222. We've written it up here. You can see that this person here is M222. These people here are all M222 as well, the green ones, but the M222 is actually further down from, they've tested further downstream from M222. And looking at the last one there circled, his SNP signature would be something like this. Haplogroup R, which is the branch of the human tree of mankind he belongs to. He's on the branch characterized by M222, and then you go down from M222, you turn left onto the DF105, and then you turn right when you get to the DF85, and that's where he's currently sitting. The next one down, he also is on that branch, but he's gone down a bit further, so you go down onto the S673, across the roundabout onto the S668, then turn right of the church onto the BY1548, and then go along for 2 miles, and then there's a left-hand turn after the gate post onto the A10680, pull your car over there, and that's where you sit on the human tree of mankind. So various people have tested further down the tree. And then the last one here, if we look at his SNP signature, he's the same as far as this branch here, DF105, but then he goes off on a completely different branch. And can we think of a reason for that? Well, let's look at his name, Malloy, his most distant ancestor, Molloy, and this one up here, Molloy as well. So it looks like the Malleys and the Malloys probably are both testing positive for M222, but after that they separate out onto different branches of the human tree of mankind. Many of them are from the New World, some of them are from Mayo, as we've already seen. This is probably an older group. They've been carrying the name for a lot longer because they got so many more mutations in their STR markers, more spread of the genetic distance. It's possible that there might be a surname switch or a DNA switch somewhere in this group, but, and dating them, we can't really date them because it is unreliable. We could take out the Malloy and the Molloy, but I'm not still sure about these ones here who have not tested anything further downstream. So it's worthwhile talking briefly about the tree of mankind. Here's genetic Adam about 250,000 years ago. He evolved in Africa, and a variety of different groups emerged as the DNA mutated over time. The group that we sit on in Western Europe is largely haplogroup R. And originally, when we started mapping the tree back in 2002, there were only 16 branches to haplogroup R, the major Western European group. In 2005, it increased to 24 branches, 71 in 2010. Then in 2013, it rose to 290. And now there are more than 10,000 branches just on our haplogroup R branch of the tree of mankind. And that's because they invented a new test called the Big Y test that looks at 85,000 DNA markers, and it's just blossoming. It's really difficult to keep up with the amount of progress that is being made on the tree of mankind. But the other interesting thing about it is that it's also very helpful for tracing human migration out of Africa across the planet. Our particular O'Malleys started here in Africa. They weren't called O'Malleys back then. And they would moved up across Saudi Arabia, and then the I branch went up to Scandinavia and then came down to Ireland. The R branch would have gone over to Iran, Iraq, and then into Russia, and then come out here into the R1b, into Spain. Last ice age forced them down to Malaga, and then they came out of Malaga and they went into Ireland about 5,000, 6,000 years ago. The interesting thing is that there are so many SNP markers being used now that the anthropologists and population geneticists that are looking at human migration, and they're looking at it from the top down. If Adam is at the top, they're coming down to the modern day, whereas we are, so you can think of it as upstream down, so they're flowing downstream, whereas we, doing our family tree research, will start the present day and we'll go back up. The two of us are meeting now in the middle. We're actually meeting the SNP markers. The human migration is coming down to the family level and to the clan level, and that produces some really exciting possibilities for the O'Malley clan. And let's look at a few of your specific DNA markers. First of all, group number 1 is haplogroup I, and we brought it down as far as about 18,500 years ago. So the age of that group so far is 18,500 years ago. But that's way, way back in time. When you look at the historical time scale here, Ireland was under ice during that time. And this particular marker evolved in southern Europe. So at that stage, 18,500 years ago, the Galway O'Malleys were in southern Europe. If we look at R1b, which is this one down here, we can see that one of the upstream SNP markers, M269, that was formed 13,500 years ago in the Caspian Sea. And a little bit more closer to home, 5,000 years ago in Central Europe. So that's just to indicate that the tree of mankind has a time, it's linked to a specific time in history, and it's linked to a specific place as well. And we can see Southern Europe, Caspian Sea, and Central Europe for the O'Malley DNA signature. Now, the other thing about a specific DNA marker is that they're linked to specific surnames, and those surnames are at times linked to historical texts, like the Leabhar Mór Menanélach, Linea Antiqua, and so on. And a great example of this is O'Malley Group 2. Their characterizing signatures L226. Where do they sit on the tree of mankind? Well, here's their SNP signature. There's M269, 13,500 years ago. Then you come down these various branches, you end up on L226, and then it comes down even further to DC29, this one here and this one here. These people have tested further downstream markers, and they can act as proxies for the rest of the groups. DC29 was formed somewhere between 1400 years ago and 800 years ago. So now we're just about getting into the time of the Gaelic clans. And L226 is the hallmark of Brian Boru and Dalcash, the tribe of Dalcash. So it means that the Limerick group of O'Malleys are actually related to the lineage of Brian Boru. And there's a specific, that's great news, isn't it? That's great news. There's a specific project called the L226 project, and anyone who does join the O'Malley project and is assigned to Group 2, they should also join the L226 haplogroup project. And here is who they match in that project: O'Loughlin, O'Hara, Klein, O'Malley, O'Brien. Okay? And these would be, the reason why they decided that L226 was Dalcassian in origin. And if you just look at this column over here, they collected a whole load of Dalgash surnames: O'Brien, Kennedy, Casey, Hogan, McGrath, and Carey. And they found that 19% of O'Briens were L226. 6% of Kennedys tested positive for L226. 50% of Caseys tested positive for L226. Hogans, McGrath, Careys, and when they added them all up, there was a huge preponderance of L226 among people who had Dalcassian surnames. And they were able to link the DNA marker with that particular clan as a result. And this is the O'Briens on the tree of mankind. And here you can see them down here: O'Brien, O'Brien, Brian. One of these people is actually Sir Conor O'Brien, the chief of the clan. So he's actually tested positive with all of the other ones for this hallmark L226. And the O'Malley's sit on the other side of the tree. It's quite a long one, so I couldn't get it in one slide. They're going to be DC 29, somewhere around here. O'Loughlin, O'Hara, Slattery, we saw that before, and McInerney. So it's going to be somewhere around this part of the tree. Somebody in the Limerick group would need to do the big Y test in order to get us placed on this particular tree. So let's look at O'Loughlin, O'Hara, Slattery, and McInerney. O'Loughlin. This is the surname distribution of O'Loughlin from 1850, and it's very nicely gathered around Limerick and Clare, which would be the ancient kingdom of Thomond. And that's very consistent with the O'Malleys being L226 and having an association with the Dalcassian. O'Hara, not so much so, because they're all over the place. But Slattery, again, Munster, it's with a large amount of them in the Clare area. But the last name, McInerney, again, very, very much centred on Thomond and Clare. So again, this is evidence that points to the fact that the Limerick O'Malleys, their closest snip matches are in Thomond, and the Limerick O'Malleys probably arose in Thomond. So what we're probably seeing here in group 2 is that these O'Malleys are carrying the genetic signature of the person that originated the name. That would be my prediction, and that is something that we will elucidate further as the project increases in size. But I think it's very, very nice demonstration of how this particular DNA marker, DC29, is centred around the Clare area. What about Galway? Where do they sit on the tree of mankind? Well, that's their SNP signature there. The age of their last one, A8611, is somewhere between 3,000 to 5,500 years old. So that's too long ago. It's way before the ancient annals. We're really looking for something that's just 2,000 years old and not much more than that. We need more people and more downstream SNP testing to elucidate where the Galway O'Malleys originally came from. What we can say for now is that looking at the tree of mankind, we've been able to come down to this area here, through the Mesolithic area, through the Neolithic, into the Bronze Age, and they're in the British Isles in the Bronze Age. Are they in Britain? Are they in Ireland? We don't know. We need to do further testing on the Galway branch to find out where they actually sit. There is a haplogroup project for the Galway O'Malleys. People should join it. You can see that one of the O'Malleys has, and these are the people that he matches: Sard, Pietz, Thompson, Chambley, Cashin, Chomley, O'Brien, Haas, Hale. A mishmash of different people. If you see where they come from, England, Scotland, Ireland, England, Ireland, United States, England, it's not clear just exactly where this particular group originated from, because we're too far up the tree of mankind. We're stuck up in the tree. We need to come down a little bit further. Lastly, the group 3, potentially the Mayo O'Malleys, M222 is known for chance matches. So it's known that people in this particular group, people on this branch of the tree, they match other people on nearby branches just by chance. And we've seen that previously. But this is an example of the distribution of L21, which is just above M22. And this is M222. You can see that it's concentrating in northwest Ireland. So this is likely to be the origin of the Mayo O'Malleys somewhere in northwest Ireland, and that's certainly in keeping with what we know from the historical texts. There's an M222 haplogroup project as well. It is the hallmark of Niall of the 9 hostages. And that has to be taken with a pinch of salt, because it's more accurate to say it's Northern Irish, Lowland Scots. There was a huge amount of migration between the two areas. It's most concentrated in Donegal, where 20% of the male population are positive for M222. And it's about 2,000 to 2,200 years old, just coming up to the time of the Gaelic clans. So in fact, Niall of the 9 hostages would be a branch below M222.
So this is taken from the M222 haplogroup project. You see that one of the Malloys is there, and he's matching 3 other Malloys. So that suggests it's not a surname or DNA switch. It's probably, or if it is, it's a very ancient one. And one of the Malleys, in particular Malloy, is the chap. He is joined, and he matches a Kilcoyne. Now, Kilcoyne, does anybody know where the name Kilcoyne comes from? Let's look at it on the surname distribution map. Smack dab in the territory of Ronuel. So again, this is another bit of supportive evidence that the O'Malleys in Group 3 are in fact from Mayo, and also that A10680 is their DNA marker. It's the marker that characterizes their branch. So again, a lot of supportive evidence, nothing conclusive, but everything is pointing to that Group 3 is in fact the Mayo O'Malleys. So the last thing that I'm going to touch on, and I'm going to touch on this very briefly, is the O'Malleys in historical texts, and then we're going to break, and any questions, more than happy to answer them. Where did they come from, but who are they most closely related to? Because one of the other things we can look at is, are there ancient genealogies of the O'Malleys? Are they related to this clan, that clan? If so, then there should be a genetic connection as well. And there are loads of, we'll just look at the Mayo O'Malleys for now. There's loads of different surnames all around Mayo. This is not clan territories, it's just the frequency of the surnames. You can see the O'Malley surname is quite large. This is a map on clan territories. The O'Malleys would have been around Clew Bay here. You've gone Con Macna Mara down here, and the Fear Dovman up there. And this is taken from Irish Pedigrees by John Hart. It says the O'Malley chief of Uwal, which O'Dugan states was divided into 2 territories. And then down here, the O'Malleys are of the same descent as the O'Connors, the kings of Connaught. So if they're of the same descent, they should have a similar genetic signature. And the great thing about knowing this from the ancient genealogies is that now we've got something to target and go looking for. Also, he says that Brian, the first king of Connaught, was the eldest son of Uchi Mwedoin. This is where my Gaelic really falls down. And who in turn had Brian had 24 sons, 3 at issue, and Conall Orison was the ancestor of O'Malley. And also the one above him, which was the Duach Galach, was the youngest son and the ancestor of the O'Connor. So the O'Malleys should be related to the O'Connors. And then there's a whole range of descendants. And here they are here. Brian, Conall, Armagh, Tuathail, Uchi, Aenus. And this goes on through time. And just there's several interesting things here. The first is this one here, ancestor 102. Donal Fionn O'Malley, his son, first assumed this surname. So this tells you when the O'Malley surname in Mayo was first assumed. The other interesting thing is that roughly about here is about 1000 AD. So before here you've got 800, 700, 600, maybe going back to 500. And looking at the other son of Brian, this is Conall Orison, who's the O'Malley's ancestors. The other son of Brian was Duach Galach, and these are the descendants of Duach Galach, including the O'Rourke, O'Flaherty and MacHugh, including Concannon and Fahy, including MacMorrissey. So from all of this, the Mayo O'Malleys should be genetically related to O'Connor, O'Rourke, O'Flaherty, MacHugh, Concannon, Fahy, Tumulty, Tulty and MacMorrissey. And we should, with sufficient DNA testing, be able to confirm this or refute this, as the case may be. We need to scour the historical texts for other genealogies, identify other surnames which may be genetically related, and then we need to go out and target those people for testing. But that's for another day. So, to conclude, there are multiple origins of the O'Malley name. Everyone has a 50% chance that their particular surname did not go back to the originator of that particular surname. There are at least 3 distinct groups of O'Malleys, one in Galway, one in Limerick, and probably Mayo as well, that third group. More people are needed to test.
More SNP testing is needed, especially with group 3, because of the problems with M222. And ideally, we need to have 2 big Y tests from each of the group so we can come further downstream on the tree of mankind. More research needs to be done on the historical texts, but this is an exciting time ahead for the O'Malley clan, and it must be great to be an O'Malley. So thanks very much. Kids up here, so I'll be hanging around for the next couple of hours. If anybody wants to buy a DNA kit or take one home with them, all you have to do is come up and ask me, and I'll get you to sign out the white form, and then you just take it away. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
We've just hit a bit of a time snag.
Sure.
As Maurice said, absolutely fascinating talk. I'm sure I've got plenty of questions. I'm sure lots of other people have as well. We'll be around for a bit. We want to try and move the agenda on. Sarah's organising the AGM in this room as well. So we'll stop this bit here. But if anybody wants to get DNA,
I'll be outside.
Please.
Great.
Please contact Maurice.
Lovely.
And once again, thank you,
Lovely.
Maurice and Maurice.